Once again, thank you all for coming. My name is Dylan Seo. I'm going to be chairing this first section, as Dan already mentioned, it's the economic crisis and working class people. So, corporate media has coined the phrase the Great Recession to describe this time period. We see that with billions and billions going to big banks and big business, bailing them out, saving them from complete failure, we see ourselves faced with over approximately 27 million people unemployed or underemployed. We see massive budget cuts in our education and our social services and in our own jobs. But here at home and across the world, there are millions of working class people fighting back against these attacks. And so to begin the discussion, we have two speakers, and as Dan already mentioned, it's Genevieve Morse, who's part of the classified staff unit here at UMass, which is also part of the MTA, Massachusetts Teachers Association, and Alan Jones, who is one of the chief editors for our newspaper, Justice, which we have out front. It's certainly worth checking out, and also concept writer for socialsworld.net. So without any further ado, Genevieve Morse.
Dylan forgot to mention in my spare time, I like to fight the bosses. Stuart here. Hi everyone. Glad that everyone was able to make it today, and I hope everyone can come tomorrow as well. I think that it's good to begin this conference with a discussion on the economy, because this crisis has marked a new situation, a new mindset for working people, not just in the U.S., but globally as well. It's exposed that capitalism is not as stable as maybe it was once thought, or able to provide for most people. And that when there is a collapse, that working people are indeed the ones that have to pay for the crisis. Huge debt. If you want to get a job, you can't get it. You're lucky if you're able to keep the one you got. And more, it's becoming very clear that most of us are mere 1 or 2 paychecks away from being kicked out of our homes. And that's, like the millions of people that were affected by the foreclosure crisis. And, for months and months, we've heard the media and economists declare that this crisis is indeed over. But I think for most of us that are sitting here today, we can be pretty sure to say that the conditions haven't exactly changed. But I'm just going to go back for a second, back in time, a couple years back, when folks might remember the complete shock and awe that was rippled throughout the mainstream media and also for economists as well. Nobody had answers for how any of this first began. Many consider a man like Alan Greenspan to be one of the greatest minds of capitalism and of our time. And yet, he was completely mystified because the way he put it, things had been going so well for 40 years. How could they possibly have gone wrong? He had no idea that he just assumed they would continue to go this way. But although the current crisis, it may appear that it may have came out of nowhere, that nobody saw this coming, but the suffering of working people has been building for a very long time, even before the massive layoffs, home foreclosures began. And unfortunately, I can't go fully in depth to all the historical things, but a key point to understanding capitalism and this not so great recession that we're in was built on the shoulders of previous crises, and that this capitalism is built with historical crises and events that have happened before. One example is the IT boom that happened throughout the country, but specifically in Massachusetts is what I was thinking of. And that after this bubble burst, the amount of jobs and the level of jobs have not returned since then, and that was back in the early 2000s. And now with the economic crisis, it's only gotten worse. That we're seeing more jobs leaving Massachusetts, etc. And beyond this, it's the very nature of capitalism that places short-term maximization of profits and private ownership as its two main ways that it functions. But make no mistake, capitalism has created an enormous amount of wealth and advancement in all sorts of areas, like technology, agriculture, transportation, etc. But we have a superabundance, and this is what they're saying is the problem, that we've got too much now, that all of a sudden we've been working really hard, but now we've gone and done it. We've really done it now, guys. We have too much. So, but that's not just the issue, but also it's a question of the control of these resources. That the distribution and control of them is what really creates these periodic collapses of the system. Working people make everything. We're always out there working. up and we go out there, but we never receive what we need back in terms of wages. That's the only thing we got is the wages that they're willing to give us or that we fight for. But and the super rich, are such a small portion of the economy that they can't possibly, they have tons of money, but they can't possibly spend it in the way that needs to be with the amount of resources that we're talking about here. So in order to overcome this problem, one of the ways that they definitely ended up creating this crisis was that they ended up needing to put forward a way to expand the spending power of working people. And that led to this credit crisis that we're currently in. This credit crisis was, and is, directly related to both the spending power and the buying power of working people, but also to make huge, unbelievable profits with these banks, these speculators, these hedge funds, all these other folks. But for most of us, we live, with credit cards, car loans, mortgages, student loans, etc. And by 2007, all debt, including household and government and business, was over 350% of the GDP in this country. It's shocking that we got into this crisis, but and on top of that, people's wages have been stagnated for quite some time now. That working people have not been receiving, in terms of inflation and what they need to actually survive. Wages have kind of stayed flatlining, or have actually, in many cases, kind of dipped because they're expected to pay more in health care. They don't get the same amount of benefits. Folks are, increasingly in non-union jobs being outsourced, etc. But just to give folks kind of a picture of this, thanks. That the stagnation of wages in terms of, like, say for example, in the 1950s, that one income could provide for 80% of all the needs of a 4-person family. 80%. That's okay. I mean, essentially you still need another job in order to pay for 100%, but that's still all right. We can work with that. Now, it's actually getting worse. One income provides only 40% of a family of four's needs. And again, all of this, while good union jobs have been diminishing, low-paid, non-benefit, non-union service sector jobs employ the majority of people. We're talking about Walmart and McDonald's and McJobs, essentially. And this gap just continues to increase, and working people are squeezed while the taxes and the benefits that the rich receive increase. And just to give an example, between 1974 and 2004, the average after-tax income of the wealthiest 1% increased 176%, while the poorest 20% saw an increase of only 6%. And so that's, basically why the ruling class wasn't and isn't willing to pay working people, because it would cut into their profits. It would directly hit at the one thing that they're supposed to do, and that they're supposed to do for their shareholders, is constantly increase to super profits, to continually maximize into wherever they're trying to get for more profits. And again, this is the one way that led to the home foreclosures, especially. We were flipping that house and this house, and they were everyone's buying up these houses in order to try to quickly flip them and make an extra dollar, because the market was going so strongly. But what also was happening was that not only were people buying these, but that banks were also trying to use this as a way to say to people, well, we'll adjust your rates. You'll get this nice subprime loan. This is going to be a really good deal for you, because once the market goes this way or that way, this could end up in your favor. And approximately 80% of U.S. mortgages issued to the subprime borrowers from 2001 to 2006 were adjustable rate mortgages.